Welcome to the 10-minute coding with Code Flash.
Creating a program in specific programming language takes time for us to learn. And one of the key principles that we need to understand thoroughly is what we call a looping statement, or if a task requires a repetitive scenario that needed to be done in a way that you will not do it manually. So the solution for that is to use a technique which is called looping statement or control structures. So here are some sample scenario that we will be doing applying a what we call looping statement. So here you'll observe there are the triangles composed of asterisk, inverted in its normal form, and another is factorial and binary sequence. So in order for us to do that, we need to create a looping statement. In this case, we'll be using a for loop. For loop is the most efficient way of creating a code in a looping statement, since it will be all of the initialization that needed, variables are enclosed within one parenthesis. So here we'll be asking the user on what would be the out input number that he want to do. So the first we'll be doing is the factorial part. So we'll be asking the number to be inputted. And then we declare a looping statement or get the input coming from the user as a reference for our loop. Then after that, we declare our for loop. Take note, we'll be creating a variable. Here is the key syntax of creating a for loop. First is the initial value, or what we call the reference of our loop. And then, actually this one needed to be changed later on. I minus minus, because we will be decrementing from 5, 4, 3 to 1. If you look at the pattern of a factorial, it multiplies its value until it's reach the value of 1. Then we'll be having factorial fc is equal to the input, which is the input coming from the user, and then input, we reassign the value of input or fc to input, or let's test this one if it will work. So I times I minus 1. Okay. Then we output the factorial of that value. Okay. fc, so take note, we declare fc as a global variable so we can access it on the outer part of the loop. So here we have a problem with fc, so declare it. Then we see there is a problem because on the part of the code that we have done, we have a reference. Instead of putting I, we put input. Okay? So here we run the program, and then if you observe, there will be an error. The factorial becomes 2. So we just need to change our formula. So instead of I times I minus 1, we use fc times the actual value of I minus 1. So it's like 5 times 4, and then the value of FC multiplied to the iteration 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so let's look at the code. So running the output, the code, it refers to 120, which is our targeted factorial. It is now correct. Now, we optimize our code. Instead of referencing it with input minus the value of 5, we'll be subtracting the value of input to minus 1 to the actual value of I. So there's an error and we need to change again. No need to have I minus 1, and then there we have 120. So we change the code to 720. So every time that we put an input to the actual code, we'll be having its corresponding factorial value. So now we'll be proceeding with the another problem set, which is the asterisk with a triangle pattern. And this type of problem requires what we call a nested loop. A nested loop is very useful when you are trying to do similar problem. However, it becomes more complicated. So the nested loop requires for us to have an inner loop and an outer loop. The outer loop is the first loop that we are trying to run. So in that case, this one, int I is equal to 1, and the reference of I is less than on the actual value of the input. So it will be our reference. The reference of our code still will be the input, and then we increment by 1. So after that, we put another loop, and this loop is called the inner loop. So another for loop, but our reference for this one will be x, but the reference on the condition would be the value of I. So x is equal to 1, and then while x is less than or equal to the value of I. So increment the value of x. Okay. So if you look at the actual code that we are trying to run, this should be the part where we will be printing the value of the asterisk. Okay, so there, print ln. Okay, so here you will see that the printing of the actual pattern will not meet the actual code. But here, I'll just put a system that out, but later on, I'll just put it later so that you can see the error. So if you run the actual code, it prints a asterisk downwards, okay? And if we will remove the print ln or the ln, it just print the actual content of the array after actual content of the asterisk going to the right, okay? Let's see. So that's the actual scenario. Now, in order for us to have a break for every printing of the asterisk, at the end of the inner loop, we'll be putting a new line on it. So we'll be having new line on it. Then we got the actual, we already answered the problem, but it ends with 4. So we just need to do less than or equal the input. So now you'll see that we'll be having the actual pattern that we want. So if you put different numbers for that one, you'll be having different result. So that's the key principle of an inner loop and outer loop. So to make it more clear, let me show you the inner loop. Where does the inner loop come from? Okay, so let's print inner loop here. So if we run this one, you'll see if how many asterisks are there, it will print inner loop. Okay, so to make it more correct, I'll just put it in the outside of the inner loop and end inner loop so that you'll see the code. Okay, so here, and you'll see the inner loop is already there. Okay, so there, you'll see that every end of the inner loop, there is an end inner loop. So meaning, before it ends the actual outer loop, it needs to end the first loop or the inner loop of the actual code. So, the bonus code for our application of the looping statement or loop control structure is the program that we have already created last time, which is the mathematical operations composed of inputting an option from 1 to 4. So actually, you can use the value of, you can replace this as plus, minus, multiply, and divide, and put the actual code in a manner that it tracks those symbols. However, the challenge of that is for the part of the choice, we'll be having a multiple declaration of the please input first number, second number, since we'll be putting it on the case. Now it's up to you. It's all your choice. It would be your choice to change this to plus, minus, multiplication and division sign, and put the actual condition and just put end sign here, end sign, so that it will not print this actual content of first number and second number and our control statement here. Now, the bonus for this code is this one, wherein we'll be making our code in a way that it will have an exit option. Okay, so print ln, so and then we press 5 to exit. Okay, so the validation of this one is exit, and then here is the choice. Now take note that there are different looping statement that you can use, and there are scenarios where you apply this statement in the different scenarios that we are trying to solve. So in this case, I'll be using the while loop. Take note, do while loop, we have do while loop, while loop, and for loop. So the do while loop, even though it has a way of creating a code or looping statement that it runs the actual code block inside the loop at least one. While loop and the for loop, they have similar function. However, the controlling part of the while loop is dependent on the variable that you are trying to do, and make sure that you will not be forgetting the actual initialization and incrementation on the part of the while loop, because it might be on the inside of the loop that you are trying to increment the value. So for example here, we'll be using while loop. While choice, we want to run the actual code while the choice is not equal to 5. Okay, so take note of the curly braces. I'll remove the curly brace here and put the closed curly braces here. Okay, so this is the pair of the curly braces of the for loop, while loop rather, and then I'll just indent this one so that it will be readable for you. So there. So let's see. Let's just check it later. So while choice is not equal to 5, Okay, and then for example, invalid input in here, and there we have no case for it, so let's just put case 5. Okay, take note, the case 5 would be your exit. Okay, so just put this one, system that out. Okay, so we just need to recompile it. Let's see. Java. There is an S. Okay. Okay, so you look at the actual code. So here, see what will happen. So here, press 1 to add. So I press 1, 5, and 6, and then result is equal to 11. So if you observe, the code runs and returns to its first execution from the choices, and then it will ask you if you want to add, subtract, multiply, or divide, and then exit. So if I press, for example, 6, okay, invalid input, and then it returns. So if I press, for example, subtraction 2, and then I'll put 5 and 3, so the result will be 2, and then it returns to our option. But if I press 5, what will happen is the program will exit. Okay, that's the way you handle a actual program requiring a min. Now I'm giving you the challenge, the inverted triangle and the binary sequence. That's all. Thank you and happy coding.